Amelia Earhart, she was the most famous aviator alive. In 1937, Amelia Earhart was attempting something no woman had done before. A full circumnavigation of the globe by air. She had already crossed the Atlantic alone. She had already shattered records that men told her couldn't be broken. The world was watching. On July 2, 1937, she and her navigator, Fred Noonan, departed Lae, New Guinea. Their destination was Howland Island, a strip of land less than 2 miles long in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They never arrived. The last confirmed radio transmission came at 8:43 a.m. local time. Earhart's voice was strained. She reported being low on fuel. She said they could not see the island. The signal was weak and broken. Then it stopped entirely. The United States launched one of the most expensive search operations in naval history at that point. 9 ships, 66 aircraft, 4,000 personnel. They searched 250,000 square miles of open ocean. They found nothing, no wreckage, no debris, no bodies. Theories emerged almost immediately. Some believed she crash-landed on Gardner Island, now called Nkumaroro. Bones were discovered there in 1940. British authorities at the time dismissed them as male. Decades later, forensic anthropologists re-examined the measurements. They concluded the bones were more consistent with a woman of Earhart's height and background. The bones themselves had since disappeared. Others claimed she was captured by the Japanese, who suspected she was conducting surveillance for the American government. No credible evidence has ever confirmed this, but the theory persisted for decades, fueled by photographs and declassified documents that suggested more than they proved. The official verdict was death by drowning. A lost aircraft. A lost signal. Nothing more, but no wreckage has ever been recovered. No definitive cause. No confirmed location. 8 decades later, expeditions still search the coral reefs around Nkumaroro. Each one returns with fragments of possibility. None return with answers. Earhart simply vanished, into clear sky, over open ocean, in full view of the world. Dan Cooper, on November 24, 1971, a man boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 in Portland, Oregon. He wore a dark suit. He carried a briefcase. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. He was calm, polite, unremarkable. Somewhere over southern Washington state, he handed a flight attendant a note. She assumed it was a phone number. She tucked it into her pocket without reading it. He leaned toward her and told her she should look at it now. The note said he had a bomb. He demanded $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, a refueling stop in Seattle. His demands were met without resistance. The airline paid. The FBI observed. Authorities complied. After the passengers were released, the plane took off again as instructed. Destination, Reno, Nevada. Somewhere over the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, Cooper strapped on a parachute, opened the rear stairs mid-flight, and jumped into a night sky. Rain was falling. The temperature was below freezing. The terrain below was some of the most unforgiving wilderness in the continental United States. He was never seen again. In 1980, a young boy digging along the Columbia River found a small bundle of decayed bills. Partial serial numbers matched. They were from Cooper's ransom. But the rest of the money, and the man himself, was never found. The FBI investigated the case for over 45 years before formally suspending active investigation in 2016. More than 1,000 suspects were considered. None were charged, none were confirmed. No body, no parachute, no confirmed identity. He remains the only unsolved case of air piracy in American aviation history. The name D.B. Cooper was a press error. It spread so far, it replaced whatever name he actually carried. Madeleine McCann was 3 years old. On the evening of May 3, 2007, Madeleine and her 2 younger siblings were sleeping in apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were dining with friends at a nearby restaurant. The apartment was checked periodically throughout the evening. At approximately 10 p.m., Kate McCann returned to check on the children. Madeleine was gone. The window shutter had been forced open. The bed was empty. A pink blanket lay on the floor. What followed became one of the largest and most scrutinized missing child investigations in modern history. Portuguese police opened a formal inquiry. British authorities became involved. Interpol issued notices. The case attracted global media coverage for months, then years. Madeleine was never found. The investigation was deeply compromised from the beginning. The crime scene was not adequately preserved. Evidence was mishandled. Key witnesses gave inconsistent accounts. Portuguese authorities at one point named Madeleine's own parents as suspects before dropping that designation without explanation. A British review launched in 2011 identified over 40 potential suspects. In 2020, German prosecutors publicly named a new prime suspect, a convicted sex offender named Christian Bruckner, a man who had lived in the Algarve region at the time of Madeleine's disappearance, a man with a documented history of crimes against children. As of this writing, no charges have been filed in connection with Madeleine's disappearance. No trial has been held. No verdict reached. She would be 21 years old today. Jimmy Hoffa ran the Teamsters Union. At its peak, that union had nearly 2 million members. Hoffa had leverage over the movement of nearly every truck, every freight shipment, every supply chain in America. He was untouchable in ways that most powerful men only imagined. He was also deeply connected to organized crime. Robert Kennedy spent years attempting to prosecute him. Eventually, he succeeded. Hoffa was convicted of jury tampering and fraud in 1964. He served nearly 5 years in federal prison before Richard Nixon commuted his sentence in 1971 on the condition that Hoffa stay out of union leadership until 1980. Hoffa had no intention of honoring that condition. On July 30, 1975, Hoffa drove to the Machu's Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. He was meeting two men, a New Jersey Teamster official, a Detroit mob figure. He arrived at 2 p.m. He waited in the parking lot. He called his wife from a payphone to say the men were late. That was the last confirmed communication anyone received from James Riddle Hoffa. His car was found in the lot. He was not in it. There were no signs of struggle. No witnesses came forward credibly. No body was ever recovered. The FBI investigated for decades. Grand juries were convened. Informants came and went. One mobster claimed Hoffa had been shot in the back of a car and his body destroyed in a meat processing plant. Another said he was buried beneath a pool. A third pointed to a farm in New Jersey. Every site was excavated. Nothing was found. The names of those responsible are believed by investigators to be known, but without a body, without physical evidence, prosecution remained impossible. Hoffa was officially declared dead in 1982. His case was never closed. Subhas Chandra Bose almost became the face of Indian independence. He was charismatic, uncompromising, and politically radical in a way that made even his allies uneasy. While Gandhi pursued nonviolent resistance, Bose believed that British rule would only end through armed force. He formed the Indian National Army. He allied with Imperial Japan during the Second World War. He broadcast revolutionary messages across Asia. He was, depending on who you asked, either a freedom fighter or a dangerous collaborator. On August 18, 1945, a Japanese aircraft reportedly crashed on takeoff from Taipei. Bose was said to be on board. Official accounts stated he died of severe burns in a Taipei hospital hours later. His body was cremated. His ashes were transferred to a temple in Japan where they remain. India never accepted this conclusion. Multiple government commissions were convened over the following decades. Witness testimony was contradictory. The crash itself was never independently verified. Some investigators found no evidence the crash occurred at all. Questions arose about whether the Japanese military had reason to fabricate Bose's death to protect him from Allied prosecution for war crimes. Alleged sightings of Bose persisted for years across India and Southeast Asia. A man known as Gumnami Baba, a reclusive holy man in Uttar Pradesh, was widely believed by followers to be Bose living in hiding. He died in 1985. His belongings included documents, photographs, and personal items that investigators found difficult to explain. India's government has declassified thousands of files related to Bose. The full picture has never emerged. His death remains officially listed as occurring in that Taipei hospital. But officially listed and definitively proven are not the same thing. Harold Holt was the Prime Minister of Australia. On December 17, 1967, he walked into the surf at Cheviot Beach near Portsea, Victoria. The sea was rough. Witnesses described dangerous conditions. Holt was known as a strong swimmer, but those who were with him that day said even they hesitated at the waterline. Holt walked in and did not come back. No body was ever recovered. The search was immediate and extensive. Naval divers, Royal Australian Air Force aircraft, volunteers, nothing was found. The official verdict was death by drowning. The case was closed, but it was never fully quiet. A 1983 book claimed Holt had been extracted by a Chinese submarine and had in fact been a long-term Chinese intelligence asset. The claim was dramatic. The evidence presented was circumstantial at best. No credible intelligence source has ever confirmed it. But the story spread and persisted precisely because no body was found and no alternative explanation was airtight. In 2005, a formal inquest was finally conducted. The coroner concluded that Holt had drowned. Accidental death. No foul play, but the absence of remains left a space that speculation continued to fill. A sitting head of government walked into the ocean and vanished. Australia named a swimming center after him. Michael Rockefeller was 23 years old. He was the son of Nelson Rockefeller, then governor of New York, heir to one of the most powerful family dynasties in America. He had every comfort available to him. He chose to go to New Guinea. In 1961, he traveled to the Asmat region of western New Guinea to collect indigenous art and artifacts. The region was remote. The Asmat people had a documented history of headhunting. Contact with outside cultures had been limited and often violent. On November 18, 1961, the catamaran Rockefeller was traveling on overturned in open water. His companions swam for help. Michael Rockefeller tied 2 empty fuel cans together for flotation and attempted to swim to shore. He was approximately 12 miles from land. He was never seen again. The official conclusion was drowning. But persistent accounts from Asmat villages suggested a different end. Missionaries, anthropologists, and Dutch colonial officials collected testimonies over the years that described a young white man being killed and consumed in a ritual attack near the village of Otsianup. The timing, the location, and the description of the individual matched Rockefeller. In 2014, journalist Carl Hoffman published an investigation drawing on decades of testimony. The picture it painted was specific, not speculative. The accounts were consistent across multiple witnesses over multiple generations. No physical evidence has ever confirmed it. The case remains officially classified as a drowning, but the testimony has never been credibly refuted either. Lord Lucan, Richard John Bingham, the 7th Earl of Lucan, was a member of the British aristocracy, educated at Eton, a professional gambler, a man of immense privilege and mounting debt. On the night of November 7, 1974, the nanny employed by his estranged wife was beaten to death in the basement of the family home at 46 Lower Belgrave Street, London. Lady Lucan was also attacked and survived. Lord Lucan was never found. Lady Lucan identified her husband as the attacker. He made telephone calls to friends that night, offering confused explanations. He borrowed a car. He sent letters to his brother-in-law. And then he disappeared. His borrowed car was found at New Haven, a port town. It contained blood and a piece of lead pipe. A coroner's inquest in 1975 named Lord Lucan as the murderer of Sandra Rivet, the nanny. It was the last time in English legal history such a verdict was returned. The theory held by many was that Lucan had intended to kill his wife, killed the nanny by mistake in the dark, panicked, and fled. Where he went after New Haven has never been established. He was officially declared dead in 1999. Then again, under new legislation in 2016, sightings were reported across Africa, Australia, and South America across the following decades. None were confirmed. He left behind a family, a dead woman, and a question that British law eventually answered by default. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he wrote The Little Prince in 1943, a book about loneliness, love, and the things adults forget. It became one of the most translated books in human history. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry was also a pilot, a reconnaissance pilot for the Free French Air Forces during the Second World War. He was 43 years old in 1944, considered too old for active service by military standards, but he flew anyway. On July 31, 1944, he departed Corsica on a solo reconnaissance mission over southern France. He never returned. No distress call was recorded. No wreckage was found for decades. He simply did not come back. In 1998, a fisherman recovered a bracelet near Marseille engraved with Saint-Exupéry's name and his American publisher's address. In 2000, fragments of a Lockheed P-38 Lightning were found on the seabed off the French coast. In 2004, a former German pilot named Horst Rippert claimed he had shot the aircraft down, not knowing who the pilot was. He said had he known, he would not have fired. The wreckage has been identified with reasonable confidence as Saint-Exupéry's aircraft. The cause of death is generally accepted as being shot down, but his body was never recovered. And there are those who find the testimony of the German pilot too conveniently complete, too neat for a case that had remained open for 60 years. Glenn Miller was the most popular band leader in America. His orchestra defined a sound. In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, Pennsylvania 6-5000. His music was everywhere. In 1944, he enlisted. He wanted to bring live music to American troops in Europe. On December 15, 1944, Miller boarded a single-engine Norseman aircraft at an airfield in England. Destination, Paris. He was to arrive ahead of his orchestra and prepare for a performance. The aircraft never landed in Paris. It was never found. Weather that day was poor, visibility was low. The official explanation was mechanical failure or weather-related crash into the English Channel. But other accounts exist. One theory, advanced by British researcher Hunton Downes in the 1980s, claimed Miller died not in an aircraft crash, but in a Paris brothel, and that the army manufactured the disappearance to protect his reputation. The theory had limited supporting evidence and has not been widely accepted by historians. A second account emerged from RAF veteran Fred Shaw, who claimed his bomber group accidentally released unused bombs over the channel that day, and that they watched a small aircraft go down. If accurate, the timeline matches Miller's flight. No wreckage, no remains, no confirmed cause. Only a flight plan that ended somewhere over cold water. Ambrose Bierce. Ambrose Bierce was 71 years old in 1913. He was one of the most celebrated and feared writers in American history. A Civil War veteran, a satirist of extraordinary sharpness, the author of *The Devil's Dictionary. A man who had spent decades dismantling hypocrisy with surgical precision, and then he decided to tour the American Civil War battlefields one last time, and then travel into Mexico, where Pancho Villa's revolution was tearing the country apart. His letters continued for a time. The final confirmed letter was written from Chihuahua, Mexico in late December 1913. He said he was headed to Ojinaga, a town then under siege. After that, nothing. No body, no witnesses, no credible account of what happened. Some believed he was killed in the chaos of the Mexican Revolution. Others believed he reached South America and died there quietly. There is a theory he took his own life, that the entire journey south was a planned final act by a man who had already said goodbye to everything that mattered to him. Bierce had written about death with such precision and darkly comic clarity that some read his disappearance as a final, deliberate gesture. His last letter includes a passage that, in retrospect, reads like closure. He was never found. No grave, no confirmed account. A man who had written about death more carefully than almost anyone simply walked into the fire of someone else's war and did not return. Barbara Newhall Follett. Barbara Newhall Follett published her first novel at 12 years old. She had been writing since she was 5. Her father, a publisher and academic, had nurtured her gifts with extraordinary dedication. When a house fire destroyed her early manuscript and her handmade typewriter, she rebuilt it from memory. At 9 years old, she rebuilt the entire manuscript from memory. Her first book, The House Without Windows, was published to critical notice. Her second, The Voyage of the Normandie, drew comparisons to adult literary fiction. She was called a prodigy, a wonder, a writer of rare and natural gifts, and then the world asked her to become ordinary. She married in 1931. Her husband, Nickerson Rogers, was not unkind, but he was not what she had imagined life would be. She worked secretarial jobs. She wrote privately in notebooks that were never published. She wrote about longing for the sea, for islands, for a life that felt like the stories she had told before the adult world had claimed her. On December 7, 1939, Barbara Newhall Follett left her apartment in Brookline, Massachusetts. She took a small amount of money. She left without explanation. She was 25 years old. Her husband reported her missing days later. Searches turned up nothing. No trace was found. Her notebooks and unfinished manuscripts remained in the apartment. No body has ever been identified. No confirmed sighting was ever recorded. She was declared legally dead in 1966. What makes her case different from the others is not what was dramatic about it. It is what was quiet. There was no aircraft, no ocean, no crime lord, no war. Just a young woman who had once written worlds into existence, who had been slowly erased by the ordinary weight of a life that did not fit her, and who one day walked out into a cold December morning and did not come back. Her notebooks, those that survived, speak of restlessness, of longing, of feeling like something essential had been taken from her. Whether she chose to disappear, whether she came to harm, whether she found somewhere she had been looking for, no one knows. The record simply ends. In each of these cases, there was a moment where everything seemed ordinary. A normal morning, a scheduled flight, a dinner with friends, a walk to the shoreline. And then, without warning, everything changed. Decades later, the questions remain.